2015, researchers from Amnesty International traveled to a residential neighborhood in Kolwezi in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They found children as young as 7 years old digging for minerals by hand, working up to 12 hours a day, earning $1. No gloves, no masks, no protection. Those minerals were in your phone. They are in the data centers running the AI models you use today. This is the supply chain that no one shows you. And it starts with a mineral called cobalt. Cobalt is a key component in most lithium-ion rechargeable batteries, the technology that powers your smartphone, your laptop, and the majority of electric vehicles on the road today. More than 60% of the world's cobalt comes from one country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Nearly 80% of that cobalt is refined in one country, China. Not a coincidence. It is the result of a 20-year strategic investment that most Western governments noticed too late. But cobalt is only the beginning. The energy transition, solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, electric vehicles, requires a specific set of minerals that are geologically rare, politically concentrated, and technically difficult to process. Lithium for batteries, neodymium for the magnets in wind turbines, gallium and germanium for semiconductors, graphite for battery anodes. None of these are as simple as iron ore. They require sophisticated chemical processing that China began systematically developing in the 1990s when no one else was paying attention. The person who understood this earliest was not a scientist or a general. It was Deng Xiaoping, who in 1992 made a statement that has become infamous in strategic circles. The Middle East has oil. China has rare earths. He said it in 1992. The world did not take it seriously until 2010, when China cut rare earth exports to Japan by 40% during a territorial dispute, and Japanese manufacturing nearly stopped. That was 15 years ago. Since then, China's position has not weakened. It has strengthened. According to the International Energy Agency's Global Critical Minerals Outlook 2025, China is the dominant refiner for 19 out of 20 strategic minerals analyzed, with an average global market share of approximately 70%. Not 70% of one mineral, 70% across the entire category. China produces over 95% of the world's battery-grade graphite, over 90% of rare earth refining. This is the physical foundation of artificial intelligence. Not code, not algorithms. Rocks. Specific rocks in specific places, controlled by specific governments. Let's follow the chain. In Kolwezi, artisanal miners dig cobalt by hand using chisels and mallets. They sell it to licensed buying houses at the Mosampo market, most of them Chinese-owned. From there, it moves to processing facilities, is shipped via the port of Durban in South Africa to China. Amnesty International traced this chain in 2016 and named those companies specifically: Apple, Samsung, Sony, Microsoft, LG, Daimler, Volkswagen, all connected through multiple layers to artisanal mines where children worked. The companies responded with supply chain audits and zero-tolerance policies. The Democratic Republic of the Congo had, as of 2024, a GDP per capita of $649. It sits on one of the most significant concentrations of transition minerals on the planet. The gap between those two facts is the story of modern resource extraction, and it did not end in 2016. Between 2020 and 2024, cobalt production in the DRC grew by 25%. The demand did not slow down, it accelerated, driven by electric vehicles, battery storage, and AI data centers. Now add the semiconductor layer. The chip at the center of the AI boom is NVIDIA's H100. It is manufactured in Taiwan using equipment from the Netherlands, with materials that include gallium nitride, where China controls nearly all of global refined gallium production. In July 2023, China announced export controls on gallium and germanium, two metals critical for semiconductor manufacturing. In December 2024, a complete ban on exports of gallium, germanium, and antimony to the United States. In February 2025, additional controls on tungsten, tellurium, bismuth, indium, and molybdenum. In April 2025, export controls on 7 medium and heavy rare earth elements implemented with immediate effect. Each announcement sent prices higher. Each announcement reminded the world of how few alternatives exist. The IEA's 2025 Critical Minerals Outlook documents what these numbers mean in practice. For graphite and rare earth elements, if the leading supplier, China, and its own domestic demand were removed from the global market, the remaining supply would cover only 35 to 40% of remaining global demand. The world outside China cannot supply itself, not even close. In February 2025, the Democratic Republic of the Congo announced a 4-month suspension of cobalt exports to curb falling prices, which had reached decade lows. Cobalt prices surged 67% in the 4 weeks following the announcement. A single government decision about a single mineral caused a 67% price movement in global markets. That is what supply concentration looks like in practice. And the IEA calculates that a sustained supply shock for battery metals could increase global average battery pack prices by as much as 40 to 50%. More expensive batteries, more expensive electric vehicles, more expensive energy storage, a slower energy transition. The European Commission has published its own list of 34 critical raw materials. For the majority of them, China is the dominant global supplier. This is not a future risk. It is the current state of the global economy. China's strategy in Africa is not primarily military, it is financial. According to research by Aid Data, Beijing channeled $56.9 billion in aid and credit for copper, cobalt, nickel, lithium, and rare earth operations across 19 developing countries between 2000 and 2021. 83% of that financing went to mining operations, partially or wholly owned by Chinese companies. Aid Data's researchers describe Chinese state banks as relationship bankers, providing consecutive loans. The goal is not return on individual transactions. The goal is control of supply chains. The United States response has been the CHIPS Act, $52.7 billion. The European Union's Critical Raw Materials Act, the Minerals Security Partnership. These are significant commitments. They are also beginning from a significant disadvantage. Capital costs for mining and refining projects outside the dominant producer regions are on average 50% higher than for incumbent producers. Chile controls approximately 30.8% of global lithium reserves. In 2023, the Chilean government nationalized its lithium sector, creating immediate uncertainty for Western battery supply chains. Together, Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia hold nearly half of all global lithium resources. None of it matters without refining capacity. And refining capacity is what China has spent 30 years building, while everyone else was looking elsewhere. Here's what almost no mainstream analysis covers and what changes the long-term picture. AI is accelerating materials science, specifically the search for battery chemistries that do not require the minerals China controls. Sodium-ion batteries, which require no lithium and no cobalt, are already in commercial production. CATL launched its sodium-ion platform in 2024. For stationary grid storage, they are technically viable today. The IEA's 2025 Outlook documents the shift in detail. Sodium-ion is gaining market share. Its upstream supply chain is more geographically diversified. The United States and Europe play meaningful roles. But here is the deeper strategic irony, and the IEA documents this explicitly. The downstream supply chain for sodium-ion, the cells, the cathodes, the hard carbon anodes, is dominated by China. CATL and BYD are leading global sodium-ion production. The country that controls today's supply chain is also leading the development of the technology designed to replace it. China is not betting on today's minerals. China is betting on being the manufacturer of whatever comes next. That is a different and more durable form of strategic advantage, and it is significantly harder to compete with. There is a direct line between a child in a mine in Kolwezi and the AI model you used this morning. That line runs through refineries in China, factories in Shenzhen, fabrication plants in Taiwan. It is a supply chain built over decades, optimized for cost, largely invisible to the people at both ends. Understanding that line does not mean stopping the technology. It means making deliberate choices about how it is built, who profits, who pays, and who decides. Those choices are being made right now in in trade policy, in investment decisions, in research labs, in government offices. Most of them are being made without adequate public understanding of what is at stake. Next, the algorithm that learned to manage the power grid, and what happens when AI becomes the nervous system of energy itself.